Hi guys, it's April, and I have a whole ton of books that I want to talk to you about today, so I'm just gonna get into it. So for the month of March, I read 17 books. 6 of those were books that I own. 11 of those were art copies. This month just went really weird, and so I just binge read a whole bunch of arcs that I've been meaning to get to. Of course, these arcs I received from NetGalley and the publishers, and that in no way is going to sway what I feel about these books. So just know when I get to that section of this wrap up, totally my own opinions. I feel like I need to say that every time I talk about art copies. So with reading 17 books for the month of March, my yearly total is now at 52 books. I thought it was kind of weird that I landed on 52 because in the past that has been my yearly goal, and I kind of hit that really nicely in 3 months. It's been a crazy year, guys. So my page count for the month of March is 4,038 pages, bringing my yearly total to 12,919 pages. I averaged about 130 pages a day, and I still sit about 2 days per read. I was reading 192 pages an hour, which brings my March reading total to 33 hours. And so far this year, I have read 117 and a quarter hours. That quarter hour feels weird saying. It's 15 minutes. So I guess now I should start talking about all of the books I read. The first book I want to talk about is Girl from the Other Side of Volume 8. I have a full review on this book, and I will link it up above and down below in case you are interested in my full in-depth thoughts. But this whole story is about the outsiders and the insiders. There is a curse going around that is changing insiders into monsters that are outsiders. And this series follows one insider and one outsider who are managing to live together. This volume is specifically heartbreaking because some very hard things happen. I like this series because it has this very fairy tale-esque quality, but it's also very dark and grungy at the same time. And plus you have this perspective of this little girl that gives all this weighty storyline, this aspect of innocence, which is very much appreciated since this is a very hard read to get through right now, especially with everything that's going on in the world. Next, I picked up Grim Lovelies by Megan Shepherd. This is the story of beasties who are animals that have been turned human, who are serving under a witch who suddenly passes away. Because they know they're probably going to be blamed for this death, and the fact that if they don't find another witch to take on their service, they're going to turn back into animals. This group of beasties goes on a mission to try and find someone to keep them human. I like the magical system that was introduced here, especially since magic is shown as having a cost. The read also had this very old world, ethereal feel to it as I was going through, and they were hopping to different places and they were seeing different things and being set in Paris. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the read. However, some of the characters were nice to see. Other characters, the relationships that started to develop just didn't feel real, so I had some issues with some of that. I also did a reread of Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I did a vlog of this reread if you're interested in that. But it has been a while since I read this book. I believe I first picked it up in 2013, so it's been about 7 years since I first read it. I now currently live in the town this all takes place. I used to live in the town where Kath and Ren live, so I know the area fairly well, which is why I wanted to do this reread, because the first time around, I did not realize where this was set. I don't know why I didn't make those connections, because I guess that wasn't why I was reading it, so I wanted to go back and reread it just to get a feel for how Rainbow Rowell portrays the place that I live. I have to say, I enjoyed seeing all those aspects, and I liked going back and seeing Kath's love of fan fiction and how she was dealing with college. I have a lot of feels towards all of that. This read, I connected to it still in the same way I did before, but I also see some flaws in Kath that make me very uncomfortable. Very. Then for my local book club book pick, we read Shadowfell by Juliet Marillier. This is the first book in the Shadowfell series. This is one of Juliet Marillier's YA reads, and it very much reads like a YA. I am absolutely in love with Juliet Marillier's Seven Water series. There's so much depth and lore involved in that one. And here, it's almost that, but it's pulled back. It's definitely a softer read. There is some lore here that I truly enjoy because you are following Niren, who has this magical ability, so it makes it so that she's hunted by the king of the land. After a series of events happens, Niren is on the run and she's looking for Shadowfell, which is the home of several rebels who are looking to overthrow the king. The magic system is fairly interesting in this one, and like I said, I very much enjoyed the lore and how they all interact with each other. I wasn't too excited about Niren as a character. She had some flaws that were really hard to read, especially when you just wanted to shake her. But overall, I did enjoy it. This first book is more about the journey of getting to where she needs to go and the journey within herself, of learning about her powers and all of that. So I enjoyed this. Then for the Tell It Again book club book pick for the month of March, we continued our Lunar Chronicles reread with Scarlet. We did a live show. If you're okay with spoilers, go watch that because Shay and I had a lot of fun just talking about this book. But this is the second book of the Lunar Chronicles series. It introduces a new character, Scarlet, and we get to see her as she's in search of her grandmother who has gone missing. You also get to go back and see Cinder and everything that's going on with her, where that last book left off, and you flip back and forth between the two perspectives. This is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, so that tells you a little bit of what is going to happen in this plot. I very much enjoyed this reread. I liked it a little bit more than I did the first time around, now that I knew that that perspective change was going to happen. There are still some flaws in the romance in this book that I don't quite agree with, so it's not as high for me as Cinder was, but I still really like this read. I also picked up Our Iceberg is Melting for my book club read for my work book club. Apparently I'm in a lot of book clubs. This book is talking about how corporations can face change in a changing world, not to bury its head in the sand, and how a company can evolve to save itself. It is set in a fable format about these penguins whose iceberg is melting, and it's kind of cute and adorable, and I enjoyed that aspect of it, and of course it is very much a business read. Now let's start talking about the arcs I received and read for the month of March. First arc I read was Cries from the Lost Island by Kathleen O'Neill Gear. I have a full review over this book if you want some more in-depth thoughts on this read. This follows Hal, who ends up in Egypt after the death of his best friend Cleo. Cleo has always said that she is the reincarnation of Cleopatra, and after her death, Hal is in search of answers, and so he goes on a dig in Egypt, and some very crazy things start to happen. I like seeing the Egyptian mythology in this read, being at a dig site and dealing with all of that kind of stuff. It gave me a very Indiana Jones vibe. I did not like some of the characters in this book. They were a little too out there for me. I did like the history surrounding Cleopatra and everything that is believed to have happened in her lifetime and just ancient Egyptian history. That's what really held this book up for me. I then read Not Your Idol Volume 1. This is a manga that follows a young girl who used to be part of an idol group called the Pure Club, when one day she is assaulted and then she kind of goes into hiding and changes her look so that she no longer looks female, and it just deals with the mental issues that arise because of this attack. I really enjoyed reading this story, seeing how she was dealing with all of that and how the other characters were watching her deal with that and helping her deal with that, or trying to figure out what she was dealing with, and the way it is dealing with views on women, especially in the Asian culture, and victim blaming. It handles a lot of these really hard issues in a way that I actually really liked. So I do want to continue reading on in this manga series. I'm looking forward to volume 2, which I believe comes out later this year. I'm hoping. I have to check on that. Then I picked up Prince Freya volume 1. This is the story of Freya, who just happens to look a lot like the prince, who passes away, and so she must step up into his role so that the neighboring kingdoms do not know that the prince no longer lives. This manga follows a lot of tropes that I see in this kind of format. Part of me felt a little weird about this format being used in a very European style, but still having a lot of the Asian context thrown in. Sometimes it felt a little jarring to me, and I have to say I wasn't a huge fan of Freya. She wasn't my favorite. It's not a bad read by any means, but I don't know if it's one that I'm going to continue to read. Next, I picked up RWBY Volume 1 of the Beacon arc. This is pretty much the manga format of the RWBY anime. It follows the same exact storyline. There isn't a lot of change that happens there. It has a lot of the same art that you already see in the anime, but it was just kind of fun to read it rather than watch it. If you're a fan of the RWBY anime, you'll probably like this manga. I then read Eat and Love Yourself. This is the story of body dysmorphia, and she struggles with accepting herself, and her dysmorphia slowly trickles into the rest of her life, and so she's living a life she's not very happy with. She then one day picks up this candy bar that every time she eats a piece, she's sent back to a different point in her life, and through this process, she starts to view a lot of how her past is affecting her future, and she slowly starts to come to some realizations. I like seeing Mindy's journey as she's slowly coming to this realization, and it doesn't help that the artwork style is absolutely fabulous in this read. This is one of those reads that I want to have in my library at some point because the artwork is stunning and I really enjoy the storyline. I then read Ghosted in LA by Sina Grace. This is a story of Daphne who moves to LA chasing her boyfriend, who then in turn dumps her, and then she doesn't know how to handle her life because she has made all of these decisions centered around this boy, but somehow she stumbles across this mansion that is home to a bunch of ghosts. She then manages to find her way into living at this house, so then it's just her dealing with life, dealing with these ghosts and their deaths. You get to see a lot of their backstory, and slowly through a process of things, they start to form this connection and these bonds and helping each other deal with life and death. I love how playful the art style is in this read. The art is always one of those first things I noticed. There were some points where that art style was a little jarring because it started out one style and switched on me, but overall, the art is absolutely fabulous. Next, I read Something is Killing the Children by James Tieran IV. This is a horror graphic novel that is centered around this town called Archer Peak, in which the children are dying and disappearing. One day, a mysterious stranger shows up in town named Erica Slaughter, who is tasked with ridding this town of monsters, which apparently is what is stealing and killing these children. This story is very much a gory read from beginning to end. It lives up to its horror nature very, very well. You are just kind of thrown into the story and slowly have to pick apart and find the pieces that explain what the heck is going on. And I highly recommend that you pick up a physical copy of this read because there are some double spreads that are hard to read in a digital format. But I do like how this read just depicts how people deal with grief in different ways and crazy things that grief can do to us. And of course, there's that. Then, to cleanse my mind, I read Rascal by Jean-Luc Deglin. This is the story of a woman who somehow acquires a cat who is a demon child, but at the same time, you just gotta love him. This very much gave me the cat mom reminiscent love feel. There are a lot of panels within this story that I very much related to. Something about occupying the same space as a cat, the adventures that you get into. This was just so cute and adorable and very realistic that I related to it on so many different levels. I also picked up The Return by Rachel Harrison. I have a full review of this one as well, so I will link it for you. This is the story of 4 friends who go on a girls' vacation after one of the girls who has been missing for 2 years returns. But of course, with the return of this friend, there are some very weird things going on. This book sits in the horror thriller mystery genre, so it has a lot of odes to things like The Shining and Rose Red and that very eerie mansion style with the place that these women stay at, and I very much like that vibe. It was a very predictable read. There was a lot more showing than letting the reader slowly figure out what was going on, which for some people that is how they want to read horror like this, but I very much like trying to figure out what is happening, and I really didn't get a chance to do this because things were just a little too obvious for my taste, but it was in no way a bad read and I quite enjoyed it. And the last 2 reads that I picked up for the month of March was a Japanese cookbook for beginners by Azusa Oda and Essential Vegetable Fermentation by Kelly McVicker. Both of these cookbooks, they broke things down in a way that made sense. However, both of them struggled a bit with not having enough pictures. With cookbooks, I like having pictures so that I can tell that I'm doing things right, and sometimes it's nice to have pictures so that you can have diagrams for how you need to fold or mold things. Here, you didn't really get that, and since it's not in video format or I don't have someone right next to me explaining it that I can ask questions to, it's nice to have those pictures. So that is everything I read in the month of March. I know it was a whole lot, so if you have made it to this point, I very much appreciate it. And you should totally leave a random emoticon down below just so that I know that you made it all the way through this video. I love that you did. And also let me know what your favorite read for the month of March is and what you're looking for in the month of April. And as always, if you would like to stay up to date with every time I upload, subscribe down below, and I heart your beautiful faces.